former CEO of Niti Aayog. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming with a huge round of applause, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Let's have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome him on stage. Sir, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us. Your presence means a lot. Welcoming Chandra also back on stage to join Sir for a fireside conversation.
Good morning, sir. I hope you can all hear us. Welcome to the very first edition of Green Bharat. I remember when I, heard you speak a few months ago in Bangalore. You spoke about the internal combustion engine is a dead technology, and that India's future is electric. You also urged the automobile industry to transition to 100% electric mobility in two and three wheelers by 2030. So, how can this really happen in terms of actioning this? How do you think India's journey towards becoming a global leader in green mobility should play out?
So Chandra, first and foremost, we must be clear that look at the global scenario. The United States has imposed 100% duty on import of vehicles from China. 100% duty is, in the history of tariffs has never been seen before. Europe has imposed a 45% duty from China. Now, if you look at the movement of EVs, China is more than 50% EV. Europe is 23% EV. US is about 10%, and India is just 2%, just 2%. Our manufacturers are 5 years behind the curve. If they were up to date today, India would be the biggest exporter of EVs to the United States and to Europe with 100% and 45% duties. So we need to accelerate the pace. The disruption will be so rapid and so fast towards electric in the next 5 to 6 years that India needs to go, to my mind, not 30% electric, but minimum 60% electric by 2030. And we need to go 100% electric by 2035. We need to do this because 42 of your 50 cities are the most polluting cities of India. And without the transportation sector being tightened up, and you need to bring disruption through policy changes. You need to tighten the CAFE norms. You need to ensure that only auto should be, the two-wheelers and three-wheelers should all go 100% electric in these 42 cities. Without this, India will be, it's like saying that we'll be selling typewriters in a digital age. That's not possible anymore. It's important for India to technologically leapfrog in automobile manufacturing, in battery manufacturing, and in fast chargers, interoperable fast chargers across the country. Without this, we lose out in the automobile revolution, because in India, 7% of the GDP comes from the automobile sector. We employ close to about 34 million people in the automobile sector. We've been a champion. There's a technological shift taking place across the world. If India doesn't do this, you lose out the market across the world. You will not be able to export. And therefore, massive disruption by the industry is required, and to global size and scale. And this is critical. And I'm making this point because the industry is sitting here, industry is 5 years behind the curve.
Wow, you sound pretty angry, Mr. Khan. But why do you think we are 5 years behind the curve? Because if I look at the numbers, compared to where we were a few years ago, I think till November of 2024, EV sales, at least in the two-wheeler space, has crossed 1 million. So the scale and volume is still there.
Don't go by numbers. Look at the percent. What is the percent? Less than 2%. What is your size and scale of India? What are you talking? Your analysis is all wrong. 2%. China is about 60% now. We launched the PLI on automobile PLI and battery PLI in 21. Not a single paisa of disbursement has taken place till now. The government has shown its intent.
Why do you think the industry is falling behind? When you say
Industry is
5 years, it's a very
See,
strong statement.
look around the world what is happening, the scale at which the transformation is taking place. If 100% duties are being imposed across the world, that India should have been benefited. If the world is moving away from China, then who's the next beneficiary of that change? It should automatically be India. India is a trusted partner. Indian exports of EV, two-wheelers, fast chargers, cars, etc. should have penetrated Europe and America by now.
So is this a capital issue? Is it an R&D issue? Is it a technology
It's
issue?
an entrepreneur
It's an
issue.
intent issue.
It's an entrepreneur issue of looking 5 years ahead of the curve, not behind the curve. We should have done this much earlier, much faster, much quicker. And I'm making this point because the world is going EV. The world is going EV because the world is looking at 1.5 degrees centigrade. You can't live in a country where 42 of your cities are amongst the 50 most polluting cities of the world. You're creating a chaos and a havoc for the citizens of India. And that's happening because of the transportation sector as well. So the transportation sector of India, young entrepreneurs must take the lead.
I'm sure the industry is
Yeah.
listening, sir.
And you can't make yourself dependent on China for batteries and for fast chargers. You have to manufacture in India. You have to. And I appreciate all the startups who've driven this. I appreciate many startups who took the lead in EV. I appreciate many of the startups who started making EV chargers in India and making them interoperable.
Right. But more needs to be done.
10x more needs to be done.
And interestingly, while startups led the charge in this space, we are also seeing some of the traditional automakers stepping up significantly. Will that move the needle for India?
See, problem is that people have become very status quoist because I'm talking about the car manufacturers. At least on the scooter side, on the two-wheeler side, there are 1,432 startups. So that demonstrates the huge strength of the startup movement, which caused the disruption.
Yeah.
But if you'd left it to the legacy players, it would have been very difficult for India to move that. Startups which have forced the pace on the legacy players as well. But look at the established car manufacturers. Indian car manufacturers like Tata and Mahindras have pushed the pedal now on new cars, new models. They will, take it from me, 1 year down the line, both on EVs, Tatas and Mahindras will face capacity constraints as new models come in. But they should not look at only India as their market. They should look at the world as their market. Because the EVs will be exported across the world.
Yeah.
And India needs to export. India needs to export because China will find it very difficult to export with 100% duty. The world is your market. This is the opportunity for Tatas and Mahindras and for Maruti and for Hyundai from India to become the biggest EV manufacturers of the world.
Right.
If you look at this, we talk about Tesla. Tesla holds only 12%. BYD is controlling 22% of the market share. But BYD will find it very difficult to export. Where will the markets be if you're putting 100% and 45%? The market is open for Mahindras and Tatas. The policy shift in these countries, Europe and America, has opened up the market for India.
So
it's
it's
for
up to
Indian
us
entrepreneurs
to
to take advantage.
Leverage. It's
Yeah.
up to us to capitalize on that and become.
Automobile sector is contributing 7% of your GDP. So if you do not make the technological shift, if you do not do pole vaulting and technological shifting, imagine the impact of India's GDP. Imagine that this sector contributes 35 million jobs. What will happen to jobs in India?
Right. Mr. Kant, in answer to my previous question, you said it's not a capital issue, R&D issue, technology issue, it's an entrepreneurial issue or an intent issue. But in terms of, building an ecosystem, because it's not just about building a vehicle, it's about building an enabling ecosystem. How can we ramp that up significantly? What lessons or models or playbooks can we adopt from all these countries? Because even to educate users, to make them overcome charging anxiety was a Herculean task. So they literally have to build the ecosystem along with building vehicles and ramping up exports. What else can be done?
So look at the government policies. You know, actually, in the last 4 years, the government has put out 75,000 crores
Hmm.
for the shift through uh,
Fame,
FAME, FAME 1,
Fame
FAME 2, PME Drive, electric fast charging, automobile PLI, look at the PLI for batteries. There's not a sector which has been left out. The first policy shift we announced was for BLIs in batteries. Uh, we've 30 gigawatts has so far been taken. Our intention was 50 gigawatt. My belief is that you know, look at this. The world today is, look around the world for battery manufacturing. The world is doing 1200 gigawatt of battery storage, giga plants, 1200 gigawatts. We have zero, right now zero. I think Ola and Reliance are getting into battery manufacturing. Ola will do it by April, Reliance will do it subsequently. About 100 gigawatt has been announced. But announcement is no good. You should crack delivery, implementation is the key. India should now have been producing about 200 gigawatt of battery in India. You can't make yourself China dependent. And similarly, fast chargers, they should all be domestically manufactured. And there are 4 or 5 really good startups which have started doing manufacturing in India. So fast chargers, interoperable, million fast chargers across the country. That is the way to go. And 100% two-wheelers, three-wheelers penetration of EV in at least 42 of these cities, which is getting polluted. And the cafe norms must be tightened on two-wheelers, three-wheelers to make them 100% EV. Go 100% EV in 42 of the polluting cities. There's no rationale. Why should the lives of citizens get impacted by polluting transportation?
I'm sure the industry is listening and hopefully they will ramp up efforts. But Mr. Kant, I have a follow-up question on the policy angle. The one thing that the EV industry is looking forward to is, how the government will go about FAME 3. And we've heard Mr. Kumaraswamy talking about it, that, it will be a broader scheme. What can the industry expect from FAME
No,
3?
so you have the PME drive.
Hmm.
My view on this is very clear, that the government should do 100%, force the two-wheelers and three-wheelers to go 100% electric. And the second thing the government must do is to do large-scale procurement of buses, like we did, about 6,000 buses for 6 cities.
Right.
Which demonstrated that you can buy buses in India, use the size and scale of procurement, like we did for LED bulbs. We procured 400 million LED bulbs, brought down the price of LED to 15% of its original price. We did 6,000 buses. It took me about 140 meetings to bring down, to get 6 cities to agree to the norms, because every city had different norms. Now, Prime Minister said 10,000 for the next one, for which the Mahua Ministry of Housing and Urban is doing 10,000. The next tender should be 30,000, the Prime Minister said. And the fourth tender should be 100,000 electric buses. Make India go 100% electric on buses. People must travel by electric buses all over. And that will make India the center for electric bus manufacturing in India.
So public transport will certainly play a huge
Public
role.
transportation is the key.
No,
And tighten the cafe norms on, allow carbon trading, and tighten the cafe norms on 4-wheelers also, and allow carbon trading. Tesla has earned 10 billion. Can you imagine, through carbon trading, 10 billion? Why should Mahindras and Tatas not earn through carbon trading? If they go electric, they should, every single manufacturer, whether it's Maruti or whether it's Hyundai, all of them must go electric.
I hope Maruti and Hyundai are listening. But Mr. Kant, You also spoke about autonomy and independence when it comes to battery cells. So at present, I think India imports all its lithium-ion cells, which has again, kept battery costs high and also hindered the widespread adoption of EVs. So, again, what else can be done here from a taxation point of view? Because I read that while EVs have taxes of 5%, battery cells and lithium ion batteries attract 18% GST. What can the government do
So
there?
let me give you a little bit of background. The production linked incentive was designed for only two sectors initially. One was battery, one was mobile manufacturing. Look where mobile manufacturing has gone. Look how much we are exporting. Look the number of jobs which it has created.
It's become a key market for Apple as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Samsung.
Yeah.
Where is the PLI for battery? We had announced 50 gigawatt of batteries to be manufactured in India in 21. Not a single gigawatt has come up here. Exporter called Rajesh Exporter took a PLI. He's not done any manufacturing. Whom will you blame? You will blame the private sector of India or not? Now, finally, Ola is going to launch its manufacturing.
Ola has put up its gigafactory.
What
and
I'm
I think
saying
Tata
is, this was transparent process. If others could do it, if electronic could do it, so could the Indian automobile sector should have done it by now. We've lost 4 years. We've lost the opportunity. We're getting into 25. We have lost the opportunity of 4 years. We should have not only done battery manufacturing here, we should have been an exporter by now.
Right.
I mean, if one sector could do it, why should the automobile sector should not have done it? In 4 years' time, we should have now ridden the wave of this 100% duty on China.
But we've fallen short of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But now the opportunity for the sector, all your entrepreneurs sitting here, make these 42 cities 100% electric, two-wheelers, three-wheelers.
I hope that will
Yeah.
be a pledge that all of you take.
Yeah.
And by the next Green Bharat, Mr. Kant should be happier than he is today at the pace of adoption and acceleration in the EV space.
No, let's be clear. It's not about my being happy or angry.
No, but you've been a passionate
I'm
advocate
saying
of this.
that
Yeah.
for the, see, first of all, this sector is impacting the lives of citizens.
Absolutely.
It's impacting the lives of every citizen. You are cutting down the lives of Indians by 10 years in these cities. That's number one. Number two, if you don't do this, you will not survive. This industry will not survive if you are not able to do the technological revolution.
That's a huge wake-up call. Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Kant, I also wanted to get your views on the rapid pace of disruption we are seeing thanks to IoT and AI. How will that impact the sector going forward?
So it's integral. Without artificial intelligence, without IoT, vehicles will not be able to sell. It's integral to automobile sector. IoT and AI will be driven by the automobile sector. It's absolutely integral to the automobile sector. Because you should be able to assess every single battery, you should be able to assess every single vehicle from wherever you are, and you should be able to monitor its performance from wherever you are. So AI and IoT is absolutely integral. This sector should be the driver of AI and IoT in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
So you spoke about what needs to be done from a manufacturer point of view, from a company point of view. In terms of the mindset shift from a consumer point of view, how do you think it has progressed for India? Do you think, the affordability has gone up, the adoption is more widespread, people are not that resistant to, owning an EV compared to, say, 2-3 years ago when they would worry about, battery discharge or charge running out?
So there's been a radical shift in the mindset. Everyone wants to buy an EV two-wheeler, three-wheeler, and now an EV four-wheeler, hopefully. My view is that in another 2 years, 3 years, consumer will not like to buy a fossil fuel technology at all. I've been a long-term believer that fossil fuel technology is totally dead. It belongs to another era. And therefore, every single consumer should buy only an electric vehicle.
Have you bought one?
I have used to use a Tata Nexon as my official car, and I'm now waiting for the Mahindra new car to come in and the Tata new Harris to come in. I'll buy both of them one after another. Yeah,
Mr. Kant leading by example. A round of applause for that.
yeah. I'm a believer in being a key player in the technology sector,
Right. But
and I really believe that every single Indian who can afford it, even if you have to take a loan, you should help to catalyze this movement.
because as he said, it's a question of our own lives and the air
Your
we breathe.
lives,
Yeah.
your see,
The quality.
7% of your GDP you lose out if you don't do this technological revolution. 35 million jobs are dependent on this sector. And only many of the young startups in India here, sitting here, will do this disruption. And you need to disrupt and do it rapidly, because you will never get this opportunity. Secondly, don't look at India as your market, look at the world as your market. I mean, there's a huge shift taking place. I mean, Biden said that there's a 100% duty is imposed. Trump will follow it up with 10% more, or probably 60%
Yeah.
more. So that means China will not be able to export to USA.
And that's
Europe
an
has put a
opening we have.
45% duty. Who has the opportunity? You're 5 years behind the curve.
Right. I also want to know how many of you in the room own an EV, two-wheeler, four-wheeler. Okay, that's about a quarter.
No, the second point, which is very, very important, is that all corporate fleets in India, and I think by a mandate, the government should force all corporate fleets and all government vehicles should go EV. There's no reason for state governments and government of India not to have EVs. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, all must go electric vehicle. I've been a long-term proponent of this. Corporate fleets as well as government vehicles must go electric.
And I think the push to procure buses will go a long
Absolutely.
way
No,
in that.
cars also. Government buys so many cars. Why should it buy fossil fuel cars? They should be all electric vehicles. Similarly, for state governments, all state governments should also get into buying electric vehicles.
Right. Mr. Kant, as we wrap up, I also want to get your perspective on the role that startups can play, because today, through the day, we are going to have startups in the EV space, people who make vehicles, as well as people who are part of the battery ecosystem, people who work on the technology side. What kind of ecosystem play can we expect to really accelerate the momentum so that we make up for the lost time that you mentioned?
So I think first and foremost is that the number of very remarkable startups working. I mean, OLA,
Yeah.
of course, is doing battery, but there are many of them doing fast chargers. They're indigenizing fast
Yeah.
chargers. India needs about 1 million fast chargers. All should be interoperable. All should be interoperable. I mean, if a company like Tesla has opened up its IP for being interoperable, every single fast charger, don't monopolize technology. Why India became a digital powerhouse was because we created UPI, which is interoperable.
The digital public infrastructure.
Yeah. So digital public infrastructure is interoperable in India. So all your startups must make themselves interoperable and allow different technologies to be interoperable so that fast charging spreads rapidly across India.
Right.
That, to my mind, is key. 1 million fast chargers across the country.
Right. If you have to give the auto industry, manufacturers, ecosystem players, 3 things to do in 2025 to make up for lost time, what would you tell them? What are the 3 most important things they should be doing?
So first and foremost, I think India needs to put up 1 million fast chargers across the country to remove...
Which are interoperable.
Yeah, interoperable. Everything should be available on an app. You should be able to figure out, every single consumer should be able to figure out which is the closest fast charger to you on an app, which should bring knowledge fully. Secondly is India must crack 300 gigawatt of battery manufacturing fully in India quickly. I think in the next 2.5 years it's possible. If Reliance has taken close to 20 gigawatt of PLI on this, they should crack battery manufacturing. India should do about 300. 100 gigawatt has already been announced. But announcement has no meaning. We should do about 300 gigawatt in the next 4 years of battery manufacturing. That's critical. And India should procure close to about 50,000 electric buses to make India move on electric buses in India. And the fourth point, 42 cities, 100% two-wheelers and 100% three-wheelers, all electric.
That's a very audacious vision.
42 cities of India, 100% two-wheelers and 100% three-wheelers across India to improve the lives of citizens.
Right. As we wrap up, Mr. Kant, you already told me that you own a four-wheeler of Tata's and you're looking forward to the one by Mahindra. But as someone who's living in Delhi, what other lifestyle changes have you made to cope with the air quality index?
So one of the key points is what the Prime Minister talked about, lifestyle for sustainability. He's talked about the life movement. Each one of us, it's very important that we make behavioral change. You know, it's not countries which will make a difference to achieve 1.5 degrees. It's the individual behavioral change of switching off batteries at the red light, of switching off taps when you are doing your when you open the tap, or behavioral changes are very critical in lifestyles of Indians across India. And similarly, across the world, because we are not responsible for polluting the world. 82% of the carbon space has been occupied by the developed world. But we must be the first country in the world to industrialize and urbanize through a process of decarbonization. We must become the leader to show the world. We are at a stage when 500 million people are going to get into the process of urbanization. We are going to rapidly urbanize. We are going to rapidly industrialize. We must show the world that we are capable of doing it through a process of decarbonization. We've done 200 gigawatt of renewable. No other country in the world has done it. We are going for green hydrogen by 2030. We import worth 180 billion worth of fossil fuel. We are saying that by 2030, we'll be the cheapest producer of green hydrogen, the cheapest exporter of green hydrogen in its liquid form, ammonia. We are saying that we'll be the biggest manufacturer of electrolyzer. We'll bring down the price of green hydrogen from $4.5 to $1 by 2030. That is the challenge for India. India is climatically blessed. You have the climatic condition which no other country in the world has, and use that to become the global champion. Make this energy shift in a manner which the world has never seen before. That should be our hunger, that should be our ambition, and that should be our passion.
Right. That's a clarion call from Mr. Amitabh Kant. And thank you very much, sir, for that electrifying session and for being candid as always. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can have a louder round of applause as we thank Mr. Amitabh Kant. As Chandra rightly said, a clarion call today has been given for a movement that most of us need to be making a part of our lives. Mr. Kant, thank you once again for taking our time and joining us for the Green Bharat Summit. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, this really was just the start of what we plan to do and what we plan to achieve right through the day. Many, many insightful panels and conversations will follow in a short while from now. What I need from all of you is also to participate, for it to be a lot more inclusive, a lot more interactive. So we'd love to hear your views as well. But let me introduce our next session, ladies and gentlemen, as we now delve deeper into this very, very fascinating world of electric vehicles. Our next session, the future of green mobility in India. With India aiming to adopt a global leader in EV adoption, this session will explore strategies to overcome barriers such as range anxiety, affordability, and infrastructure development. Ladies and gentlemen, and to steer this conversation, join me in welcoming Kranti Sambhav, the editor at Overdrive, who in fact will be moderating this session. Kranti, welcome. Join us on stage. Please Let's also welcome our stellar panel, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Amit Bhatt, MD International Council of Clean Transport, Sean Colworth, COO Ola Electric, Satender Singh Bajwa, Chief Commercial Officer at JSW MG Motor India, Hardeep Singh Brar, Senior VP Sales and Marketing at Kia India. Gentlemen, good to have all of you with us. Kranti, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kranti Sambhav, editor Overdrive, and want to welcome you all to the second session of first Green Bharat Network 18's Green Bharat Summit, powered by Ola Electric. And I guess first session, kind of guide, and I guess it is going to guide the whole day today. The agenda is guided by the session done by Mr. Amitabh Kant, and the kind of appeals we saw is going to guide the conversation. So in this session, the theme of this session is the future of green mobility. And we are going to talk about the challenges, opportunities, and the strategies by different manufacturers, all the stakeholders. And we would like to, we might avoid, or we'll try and avoid those go-to phrases which we generally, associate with the moment we talk about electric mobility. That is range anxiety, charging time, price barrier. We will discuss them as well, but we will go beyond that, because I'm sure this is why, with the help of our expert panel, this is what we'll achieve. We have Mr. Amit Bhatt, who is India head for ICCT, International Council for Clean Transportation. We have Satender Bajwa, who is the Chief Commercial Officer, JSW MG Motor India. We have Sean Calvert, who is CEO Ola Electric, and Mr. Brar from Kia India. And as we mentioned, this session is about the future of green mobility in India. So rather than talking about, we'll jump to this thing, but really want to understand the first session. What's your reaction? I'll start with Mr. Brar. What Mr. Kant mentioned, I think it's a very passionate appeal to all the manufacturers, and this is going to guide the future conversations.
Thank you, Kranti. Is he still around? No? Okay. Okay. I think he was really passionate about what he said, and I agree that the pace should be fast. But I think we need to look at certain points as to why the pace has not been so strong. I think let's look at the PLI schemes. I think kind of capital investment that you need for PLI schemes is not easy. It requires a huge amount of investments. And even in terms of project execution, it takes really long time. So to expect to happen it in a short span of time, I think it started somewhere in September 2021 when the PLI scheme was announced. It's been 3 years. A few companies have moved ahead. But I think primarily a lot of OEMs also found it difficult because the pace of adoption of EVs, especially in four-wheelers, has not been so strong. It's just about 2%. And as we see all the technology, they usually take a S curve, right? Initial adoption is very strong. So if you see 3 years back, it was 0.5%, moved to 1%, and then 2%. So 3 consecutive years, EVs were just doubling up. But come 2024, it just stagnated at 2%, right? And one of the reasons I would also say has been kind of not having a strong coordination between center and states. Now imagine a couple of states have already started giving incentives on hybrids. I mean, the road tax and registrations have become zero. And UP being one of the biggest states in the country, I think it really put question in OEM's mind whether we should go ahead or not. is hybrid is the way forward or EVs is the way forward. I think there was a big confusion. Chandigarh also followed. A couple of other states are also discussing. So frankly, I think we have to be very, very clear what direction we are going to take. So, coming to the PLI scheme, and of course, one of the big things, if you see the charging infrastructure. Now, compared to China, I'm forgetting the number, the charging infrastructure, the chargers across China run into million of chargers, right? And in India, we are less than 20,000 chargers. So how do you give confidence to a consumer? I think EV is a great story, especially from four-wheeler perspective. Running inside the city is phenomenal. It gives you very good mileage. But moment you go on the highway, imagine traveling from Chandigarh to Delhi to Chandigarh or Delhi to Jaipur, about 250 to 300 kilometers. And whatever we may claim, the mass market cars which claim about 300 to 350 kilometers on a single charge, the moment you hit a highway and you start cruising at a speed of 120, 150 kilometers per hour, the battery charge dips dramatically. And I've seen a number of cases that you start from Delhi and then you have to charge on the way. And unfortunately, there aren't too many fast charges on the way. So you want to take a coffee break or a tea break or a short food break, you need at least 20 to 30 minutes, but your car cannot be charged in 20 to 30 minutes because there is lack of charging infrastructure. So I think it's very easy to say that, OEMs are taking time to really move forward. But I think we need to look at what are the issues at every step. And I think we need to solve one by one each of the problems rather than just pushing without any, without pushing too much towards the OEM. So I think we need to look at all the problems in the equation and try to solve it. On top of that, the resale value is a big concern for EVs. Which is a big concern for the people who are buying the cars. So they are still not certain about it. The choice, I think not every OEM has the cars today. I think only two players have it. Right. Once the choice increases, there'll be more people who will be adopting. And last point is about the price parity between the ICE and the equivalent EVs. So the price gap between EVs and the ICE cars is about 40%. And I think the inflection point will come when this price gap reduces to about 15 to 20%, and with the battery cost coming down in future, which is about 110 USD per kilowatt hour. I think the moment it starts dropping to 90 or 80, I think the price parity will come. So I think these are a few of the challenges which we need to solve for.
Right. And Mr. Bajwa, I wanted to understand another point. And how do you take that? That's interesting comparison between mobile industry and automobile industry about the PLI. Could you give us the context? What went, for the mobile industry and not for automobile industry?
So, very good morning to all of you, and thank you very much. So, I think first of all, taking from what Hardeep said, and I keep telling that next 5 years are going to be very, very complex for the auto industry. It's a highly capital-intensive, manpower-intensive industry, and roadmap, I think, needs to be far more clearer. What direction we want to take sometimes, and policies have to be more consistent if we are really serious about EV adoption, especially in the four-wheeler ecosystem. And it's not only manufacturers, right? I mean, I'm very happy to share that as JSW MG Motor India, 60% of our portfolio, what we sell is a EV today, right? I don't think any manufacturer can claim that in India. But then there are challenges, which Hardeep has spoken about, and I'll not touch upon that. I think the PLI scheme, which has come forward, offers certain complexities. I think there needs to be little simplification that is required on that front.
Policy level.
Sorry?
Policy level, you meant?
Yeah. So that it's more easy for manufacturers to actually get benefit out of that. While most of us are trying for it and working towards it, but I think it is taking some time. And I think it's not only the manufacturers. See, today the consumer also has a reservation towards the EV adoption, especially when it comes to this thing. So it's all about how you are able to set up the entire ecosystem and how you are able to give that confidence to the consumer. And I would say that as manufacturers,
it should be our responsibility, whether it is two-wheeler manufacturer, four-wheeler manufacturers, that you deliver quality, consistent products. That's very important because for a consumer, whether it is range anxiety or it is safety of an EV, I think these are two big concerns in his mind, which is actually kind of holding him apart from what you say, your resale value, financing, and all that stuff. These are all I think it's an ecosystem which needs to work in that direction.
Sean, what about the global outreach of Indian manufacturers? I mean, Ola definitely has that kind of ambition, but what Mr. Kant also mentioned, that this is not only the time to capture or push for electrification of Indian market, also look at global products. Why not compete with global giants? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so good morning all. So my thoughts on that, and if I reflect where India is today, and I've been in this country for 2 years now, okay, and what I see here that within this country, you've got the capability, right? You've got the resources, then now's your time. Now's your time to actually really penetrate the global market. I can see that you've actually started to, we've started to head on that EV journey at the moment, and I think adoption is there, right? And if I look at adoption domestically, it's there at a two-wheeler. You look at the market share increase year on year, it's definitely there. So I think when I look at product quality, which you mentioned, it's there as well. So I think now's the time for India, not only to concentrate on domestic, but export to global, right? And don't miss this opportunity. Please understand, this opportunity, this window will only be there for a short period of time. And I think Mr. Khan mentioned 5 years. I think it'll actually be shorter than that, right? So that's my views.
That's great. Amit, you interact with manufacturers as well, but you also work on the policy front. What Mr. Khan said and what Mr. Brar and Sean and Mr. Baja said about the manufacturers' point of view. What is the gap according to you?
So if you look at 2% is what we are not now and where we want to be, right? So we did the research to understand if India has to meet the net zero target of 2070, what does it mean for the automobile segment? And we concluded that between 2045 and 2050, we have to electrify all our vehicles. When I say all our vehicles, two-wheeler, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, buses, and trucks. Bulk of it, from our side, probably 99% would be battery electric, 1% would be hydrogen fuel cell. That's it. So the question is, how do you move from 2% to 100% in next 25 or 20 years or so? We are currently using the whole demand side approach. So we are giving subsidies to bring down the cost, hoping the end user will buy it. It works to an extent that you can maybe get 3, 4, 5% uptake. But we want uptake at scale. Now, how do you get uptake at scale? It will never happen through demand subsidies alone. Because one, you don't have enough money to subsidize all the vehicles in India to convert to electric, and you don't enough have time. So what policies will drive this transformation, right? So we looked at global landscape and we found that two most effective policies that drive transformation at scale. And these are not demand side policies, they are supply side policies. So let's look at Europe. So Europe has something called a CO2 emission regulation, wherein you averaged out, you give a target to OEMs to meet the CO2. Next couple of years, they will be at 70 grams CO2 for cars. India currently is about 135 grams CO2 per kilometer for cars. That's the delta. Similarly, US has a greenhouse gas regulation. So one, we have to improve the efficiency. We have to use this fuel efficiency regulation, which Amitabh Kant was talking about, to kind of increase more electric. The second is giving some kind of sales target. California has done phenomenally well in making sure that each OEM has to sell a certain % of its fleet as electric. And it does two things. So OEMs who are forthcoming in electric, they get rewarded for early movers advantage. So when they sell more than the quota, they get credits and they can trade that credits with OEMs who are behind the quota. So I think once we bring in the supply side regulation, we will see scaling up happen at falls. And that is what we need from our side.
Mr. Bharat, from 2% to 30%, I'm talking about just by 2030, because this is what we have, we have been discussing from really long time. By 2030, we are looking at 30% of transportation, which is electrified. How can we, how do you see it right now? What are the challenges? And do you think we need some tweaks to reach that?
So by 2030, I reckon it would be about 15% against the 30% what was the original plan. I think 15% is doable. And why I feel it will happen, firstly, as I mentioned, the battery cost would come down as the battery technology improves and the raw materials supply improves. I think the cost, which is, as I said, 110 USD per kilowatt hour, comes down to 80 to 90. I think that's a significant drop of 25 to 30%. And that brings me to the point of the price parity, which today from 35, 40% down to 20%, moment it becomes affordable and people see that, okay, today, if you see the price gap between petrol and diesel is about 200,000 rupees. And that translates, so this 20% actually translates to 200,000. So in another 2 to 3 years time, I feel this price point will be very, very close to diesel and petrol. That's when it becomes very easy for people to start switching over. The second point, with battery technology improving, I think the minimum range that you need in a passenger vehicle or a four-wheeler is 500 kilometers. I think that's the range where people will feel comfortable, because even if you get 70% of that range at a high speed, which means 350 kilometers, I think a consumer needs minimum 350, whether it's Mumbai, Pune, Delhi, Chandigarh, Delhi, Jaipur. I think all these cities, or Ahmedabad, Baroda, they are in the range of 200 to 300 kilometers. And once you reach that city, you need to move around in the city, so you don't have this pressure on your mind that by evening, whether I'll be stranded in the city or not. So I think once these two things are solved, I think we can even go further than that. And the third thing, as I mentioned, I think we need to be very clear. Are we going the hybrid way? Are we going the fuel cell way? Or are we going ethanol flex fuel vehicles? So I think right now the discussion is happening in all directions. And every meeting you go to, a new fuel will emerge. I think we need to be very, very clear, okay? It's going to be EV, nothing else, and everybody, including the OEMs and the government, needs to work in that direction.
Mr. Bajwa, how can we channelize that conversation? Because this is the conversation I also, see from our viewers when they ask questions whether I should buy this car or not. Should I go for electric or should I go for hybrid? Why? Because there is a there is some kind of question whether it's not only Delhi NCR, but otherwise also because they're keeping the car for 5, 6 years, 10 years, whatever. For manufacturers, what kind of clarity you need so that the conversation is focused that between electric, hybrid, fuel, flexi fuels and ICE?
So I think first and foremost is there has to be a clear definition on government incentives. See, let's accept the fact that while I know incentives are not good in the long run, but for the current in the current situation, especially in the mass segment, the industry needs, the consumer at least needs an incentive, because there is a price parity currently in the mass segment between a EV and a ICE vehicle to a tune of 30-40%. So to bridge that gap, that is where consumer he needs that kind of support. Number one. Number two, certain state governments, like Hardeep mentioned, that when you are giving a similar kind of benefit to a hybrid, then the customer today, the only problem while EV adoption is because in a mass segment, largely EV has become a city phenomenon. It is still not becoming an intercity phenomenon, right? And so if you look at a mass segment, it is divided into three, your first time buyers, your repeat buyer, your replacement, and your additional buyer. So the first two segments itself, they don't even look at EVs right now. It's only the third segment, which is additional car in the family, which is also probably a third car or a fourth car in the family, which is an EV. So unless until we attract these first two segments also, maybe the first time buyer still probably will take time, but at least the guy who's replacing a car, the moment we are able to meet his requirements, what he's looking at a ICE vehicle. See, today where there's a problem currently, there is no ecosystem for resale value in EVs. So you can try it out in the market. It's a big challenge, right? First, to sell the EV in the resale value. Second is still there is a anxiety in consumer mind. What will happen if my battery conks off, right? So I think as manufacturers, there are 3 or 4 areas we have to address, and we'll have to probably take that lead in giving that confidence and comfort to the consumer. So number one, as a mass segment I'm talking, how do you give that confidence to a consumer that the cost of an EV and ICE is almost similar? I mean, you must have heard that we had introduced a concept like battery as a service, where we said you buy the EV at the cost of an ICE. We give you the same segment car at a similar cost, and you rent the battery from us, which is basically 3 rupees 50 paisa. And even if I add 1 rupee charging cost to it, it becomes 4 rupees 50 paisa. And for that segment of a car, for a gasoline, you need 8 to 10 rupees a kilometer is a running cost. So you save on this thing. Secondly, how do you give consumer this confidence? So we said, suppose Kranti buys this car. So Kranti, as long as you are running this car as a first owner, your batteries are headache. You don't have to worry about it, right? So people talk about 8 years battery life, this and that. So tomorrow you have a challenge. So even if you're driving for 10 years, 12 years, we take care of that.
Right.
Third part is on the resale value, which I said, because when you are changing car after 3-4 years, you need a good resale value. So we went ahead and we said that, okay, we will give you 60% assured buyback if you change your car in 3 years or till 3 years. So I think this has given some momentum, I would say, some positive move we have seen out of these, some of these, initiatives that we have taken. And I think the industry needs to come forward on this part, how we can do it. Today, if you look at your luxury car segment, their adoption is better. They are almost at about 7-8% of adoption to the total luxury sales. The reason there is because price parity is not there, range anxiety is not there because they're getting good rate.
Right.
But they will also face a challenge when it comes to the resale value of the car.
Understood. Mr. Calvert, one thing which I wanted to understand, because the moment we talk about transportation, mobility, it's more or less hijacked by four-wheeler guys. So what's the challenge, or what's that reading you have for two-wheeler segment? How different are the challenges there?
So I'll start with, I've heard the topic a couple of times, which is price parity. All right. So if I take two-wheelers, again, 2 years ago when I came to India, it's fair to say there was that large gap. I'm pleased to say, due to efficiencies in the supply chain, economies of scale, because the volumes are starting to increase, as well as battery prices coming down or cell prices coming down. It's fair to say on the two-wheeler side, you're starting to see price parities just about there now, right? And on the EV side, there's higher technology within, because it's the two-wheeler products have got higher electronics than what an ICE product would have in it. So you've got higher technology, price parities there. I think, from a challenge point of view on the two-wheeler side, it's okay now, right? So it's much better than what it was 2 years ago. Again, competitive supply chain, lower sell prices, economies of scale. It's about right now.
Mr. Bharat, recently we had this conversation. If you remember, recently Royal Enfield announced their electric motorcycle. At that time, we were chatting with Mr. Siddharth Lal, and we asked him that, are you also thinking of putting up chargers? And he said, as a manufacturer, I'm not supposed to put, why should I put chargers? You don't ask manufacturers, ICE vehicle makers to put up fuel pumps. So that was like interesting argument, but at the same time, it's a big challenge for you also. So what about fast charging? How can we solve that problem? And how do you think as a manufacturer we can solve that problem? Because now the conversation has moved from charging time to fast chargers.
I think that's a great question, and I feel we need to come together as a team. I think no single person can take this responsibility, neither government, nor private operators, or nor OEMs. I think we all have to work together. To give you an example, I think OEMs need to make sure that all the touch points, for example, we have 700 touch points across India, and we need to put chargers at all these 700 touch points. In metros, there could be fast chargers, smaller towns, slightly. So it varies from, fast chargers vary from 60 kilowatts to 250 kilowatt hours, right? And we have, in the first 15 dealerships where we started our EV sale, we started with 150 kilowatt bit, which did not exist anywhere. Now, if you want to charge your car in 20 minutes, go to any of these 15 Kia dealerships and you will get charged within 20 minutes. We have even one 210 kilowatt hour charger. So I think that's the initiative we are taking. Similarly, we have charge point operators and government as well. Because if you see the success story of China or Europe, I think government has a big role to play in terms of bringing these chargers across the country. I mean, highways is, I think more than, I think Satinder in yesterday's meeting mentioned that 80% of the charging app happens at home. And the reason for that is because people do not take their EVs outside the city because they're still scared. They don't want to take it on highway, and hence the charging happens at 80% at home. Moment people start taking and they are confident about their cars and confident about the charging infrastructure, this 80% will drop and the public charging will increase. The fact that there aren't too many chargers, people are very, very constrained and they want to stay at home. So I think it has to be a teamwork and we all need to play our roles very well. And the last point, which came out in yesterday's discussion, and I'm coming back to hybrids and EVs, like in mutual funds, we say mutual funds sahi hai. And somewhere we need to say, and even government needs to participate, EV sahi hai. So that, we all are focused on EVs and not getting digressed from that. And that's where the momentum will come into this side.
That's a good idea. And what you mentioned about public charging, the figure which he mentioned, at the time of launch, I was also thinking, why are they offering, free public charging? Because they knew that 80% of people, they are charging at home only. So they don't
You caught it.
One question which many critiques raise, Amit, this is for you. Are green cars, are electric vehicles really green? Because if we look at the energy generation, maybe 2/3 or maybe between 2/3 and 3/4 energy in India is coal-based or thermal-based. If you charge the EV with that, are they really green?
So we did a research to look at, with the existing grid, which is predominantly fossil fuel based, what does it make for an electric car and electric two-wheeler in India? And we found that electric car is roughly cleaner by 20% in terms of life cycle emission. Electric two-wheeler is almost 40% cleaner in terms of life cycle emission. Now that's one part. The second part is, as you increase renewables, you will only get cleaner. So the pathway is very clear for electric. You pump in more renewable and use battery to power these vehicles, and that's one part. The other interesting bit, which I think a lot of people may not be aware, we did a research to understand what's the real world emission from motor vehicles when they are under operation. So when you go for PUC check, the vehicle is stationary, it is not moving. But the health is impacted by fumes when vehicles are moving. And we found that in real world scenario, emissions in Delhi can be as high as 25 times the lab limit. It changes with fuel types, it changes with age of the vehicle, it changes with use of the vehicle, commercial versus personal, and it also changes with OEMs. So I think that is something which is very important, because climate is one, but public health is something that is impacted every day. And I think that is one more compelling argument to shift to zero emission vehicles.
A related question: when we are looking at cleaning our cities, green mobility, greener tailpipe emission, at that time, even if we buy new electric vehicles, green vehicles, older cars and commercial vehicles especially, they're still running. How do we manage that? Because simultaneously you have cleaner cars, but at the same time older vehicles are still producing or emitting.
So yeah, so if you look at Delhi, so has put a restriction on 10-year, 15-year-old vehicles. So what happened to this vehicle, right? So they are deregistered. Either they are re-registered in some other parts where emission norms are not tightened enough and they can run, which is really not great, or they get scrapped at the scrapping center. So I think what we need is, if you look at the PM drive Mr. Kant was mentioning, for electric trucks, the government has said we will give subsidies only when you scrap your old electric truck, old conventional truck.
Okay.
So some kind of scrappage mechanism for buying new vehicles, especially electric, can be a good way to incentivize both the sides of the demand.
Okay, so now I guess our time is up, and I assume that there's one more meeting which is happening where Mr. Brar has to go, and he will discuss, I think, similar stuff what we discussed, and first session will be mentioned there, I guess. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for taking out the time for us and for this enriching, enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kranti.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to our stellar panel. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, Kranti, for moderating that so well for us. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now move ahead and continue our conversations and dialogue in this world of electric vehicles. We will now turn our attention to India's critical role in the global EV landscape with the session which is aptly titled India for the World, Unpacking India's Cell and Battery Ecosystem. Now, you would all agree with me if I just put this picture in front of you. With India's domestic battery manufacturing projected to reach $2 billion by 2030, this session will deep dive into how India is creating a robust ecosystem for battery innovation, manufacturing, but most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, also setting those new benchmarks for affordability and sustainability, not just in India, but worldwide. And to moderate this session, ladies and gentlemen, I would want you to put your hands together as we welcome our moderator, Parth Sharan, automotive contributor for moneycontrol.com, to please join us on stage. Let's welcome Parth, who in fact will be our moderator. Let's also give it up for our stellar panel as I start welcoming them, ladies and gentlemen. Chetan Mani, co-founder and chairman at Sun Mobility. Nitin Gupta, co-founder and CEO at Etero Recycling. Pulkit Khurana, CEO Battery Smart, and completing this lovely panel we have Vishal Chaturvedi, Senior Vice President, New Business Initiative at Ola Electric. Good to have all of you with us. I think we can have some more energy, ladies and gentlemen, and a louder round of applause for them. Gentlemen, good to have you with us. The floor is all yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Parth Charan, and we've got an excellent panel with us today, all stalwarts from the Indian battery EV ecosystem. We've got, of course, Mr. Chetan Mani, a man who needs no introduction. He was there at the beginning of it all, a pioneering figure in the Indian EV ecosystem and the founder and chairman of Sun Mobility. We've got Mr. Pulkit Khurana, who is the co-founder of India's largest battery swapping network, Battery Smart. We've got Mr. Nitin Gupta, who is heading Etero Recycling. And of course, we've got Mr. Vishal Chaturvedi, who is heading the battery cell department at Ola Electric. Gentlemen, welcome to the first ever Green Bharat e-mobility summit. Unpacking battery ecosystem of this country is a very hot topic right now. And at the outset, the problems that seem to be plaguing us, to begin with, are raw material dependency, lack of a skilled labor force, and high initial investment costs. So, Chetan, as the sort of de facto first citizen of India's EV ecosphere, I'd like to start with you. Can a nation like India, can we compete with China and the US on the international stage at some point when it comes to EV battery manufacturing, if not in economies of scale, then through IPs?
Yeah, I think it's an important part considering that the value chain is very high on the entire vehicle side. I think we've done the first part, which is making packs. The second is we're getting raw materials in and making cells. I think that's also easy. A lot of companies are coming out. That's doable on this front. I think the third is trying to figure out how we get the anodes and cathodes, and then the raw material around that, where that's important because unless the processing of electrolytes, separators, anode and cathode materials are done in India, we're not going to get that kind of scale. And I think the last part is, our strategic alliances on core raw materials, be it lithium and others, like we do with oil today. The challenge, I think, is we're starting, like in any industry, when you look at solar and everything, we start from the easiest part and we wait too long to get the other ones. So by the time we come in, we lose the game. I think what we have to start today in India is at all fronts, so that when the first piece of batteries grow up to, several hundred gigawatt level, the remaining pieces are done. So this part, even with ACC and stuff, is not going beyond the cell side. So I think if we're able to do that, that would be one. Um, Clearly, training is going to be extremely critical at scale. Can we sort of mimic what India did in the 90s with the IT business, where every corner you had training areas, and we built up an IT business here. So the amount of finishing schools we need, the amount of area to train, is at a scale that's probably 10,000x of where we are today. So it needs to be done, I think, at a very large part of it. And I think low-cost financing is going to be very important, and a long-term vision on this. The last part I would say is you need a pool in demand, right? Because we need to see that can you have certain cell sizes, not 100 of them, 10, 15 for the country, or maybe less than that, where then there is sort of scale of economies, and then multiple OEMs and energy providers can pool demand across mobility and storage and integrate that such that then we're able to look at it. I really feel if we do it right, 5 years from today, we could be in a very strong position. And I do believe in an area where technology is rapidly changing, that IP will play a large role. And so it's not just about manufacturing, but about our technical prowess of trying to create newer solutions that is going to be as important as we think of this.
Right. Pulkit, I want to ask you, do you think the need of the hour is, strategic alliances with resource-rich countries that aren't China? Because clearly resource scarcity is a problem when it comes to battery manufacturing. How do we achieve economies of scale when it comes to this?
I think it's very important to realize that China didn't start yesterday on this journey, right? They started securing a lot of raw material 20 years ago. They're way ahead of where we are today, and we have a long journey to kind of catch up on that. Whether it's resources in terms of the raw material itself, or even the technology in terms of the kind of cells that we will manufacture. But it's also an opportunity for us to kind of leapfrog and take those learnings ahead rather than just following what was done. A good example is the cell form factor that Ola chose, for example, right? This is where they are also today as a country in terms of 4600 series. And it's heartening to see that most of the cell manufacturers in India are adopting to those form factors. Same is true for chemistries. A lot of NMC to LFP movement is happening, but there are further improvements that could be driven out of India because we have the advantage of setting that up today and no legacy capex to take care of, right? This is one of the challenges that China is struggling from because of the stagnating demand and thus the lowering of prices. But that's also an opportunity for us as a country right now while we do not have our own production, right? I think all of these factors, if you look them in a holistic manner, along with the upcoming demand on energy storage as well as the EV in India, it's the best time for us as a country to be able to do this, to do mass scale production on lithium ion cells and deploy them domestically, given there is enough demand, right? With enough constraints or maybe certain taxation levers that the government can pull up at the right time. I think a lot of demand boost can be given to these production houses as well.
Right. Vishal, like Pulkit said, countries like China have had a huge head start and we've kind of hit the ground running. As the first OEM to have manufactured its own battery cell, the fact that there's still we're still way behind in terms of having lithium refineries, etc. Do you think that sets us back in a big way? How do we play catch up?
Good morning. Pulkit mentioned how China has this advantage and they started like 20 years back. But we also need to note that China did not have this natural advantage because they don't have the lithium mines, right? They still source the lithium from, let's say, Australia or Argentina and process it, refine it, and then sort of sell it to the world, like put it in the batteries and then sell it to the world. So India has a similar opportunity, right, where we can do strategic alliances with like-minded countries and have access to these resources, so that our supply chain also gets built in the process, and that will give us economy of scale, right? I mean, that will give us confidence, the other manufacturers, to sort of build in India. And as Mr. Amitabh Kant also mentioned, I mean, if you look, like, step back and look at the global landscape for cell manufacturing, it's all dominated in China and then in Korea. And with all the duties and the tariff war that's happening between China and the other geographies, uh, it opens up a very, very large market for India, because outside of China and Korea, there hasn't been a very successful battery maker, right? And Europe and China, for whatever reasons, will take time to develop the ecosystem. India has that opportunity. Indian players have that opportunity. So India needs to look at the domestic demand as well as the global demand, and that will give us enough, sort of economy of scale to invest and move forward with the battery manufacturing.
Right. Uh, Nitin, we've interacted in the past, and you've mentioned that Atero is among the first companies to be able to extract up to 90% of lithium from end-of-life cycle and manufacturing waste. Uh, how important is a battery recycling apparatus in a country, and can it make us more resource independent, or realistically, at best, can it serve as a ballast of sorts?
Thank you, Parth. So great question, Parth. Couple of things. First of all, we recover more than 95%, but that's maths. Let's leave that aside for the time being. Let me take a step back and try and address this issue in conjunction with what the panel was discussing a few minutes earlier, right? So if you look at what's happening in the cell manufacturing space globally, obviously China has taken the lead. They started much earlier. They have sort of access to resources, and they put a lot of capex to build refining plants to make sure that they can sort of go up the value chain, right? Having said that, given the geopolitical situation playing out, both in US and Europe and other places, there is a very strong ex-China policy that's out there, right? And the fact that the entire EV ecosystem, I would still classify, is it in its infancy, right? So there is a technological leapfrog available that India can sort of take advantage of, and take advantage of the geopolitical situation to actually build a great EV ecosystem for the world from India, right? For that, I think all the ingredients are there. Obviously, it will require a lot of capital. It'll require some bit of government support from the government of India, but the opportunity is right there, right? Coming back to recycling, and one case in point is recycling, right? So Atero today, very small plug, has 46 granted global patents on recycling technologies in the world. Our recycling technology for lithium and batteries is actually better than China. And we are not saying, a lot of Chinese companies are telling us as well, right? From a resource efficiency standpoint, in our opinion, if we can scale up recycling well and make India the hub for battery recycling globally, which by the way is very sustainable. We recently got a GHG emission study done as well, I think ISO 14064, which basically says the lithium carbonate that Atero produces is almost 98% lower GHG footprint than what comes out of mining, right? So if we can make India the recycling hub for the world, we can at least be self-dependent on critical minerals that are required for the EV ecosystem to sort of prosper.
I'll come to the battery waste management issue later, but I want to address the swappable battery versus fixed battery issue. Now, Chetan, you've mentioned that a swappable battery, Sun Mobilities, they use about 6 times less lithium. So clearly, there's a very clear advantage there, and yet it would appear that a lot of OEMs are diametrically opposed to this view, because of course they want to have as much control over the battery management system and proprietary tech to offer the best sort of experience to the customer. Do you see greater applicability for swappable batteries outside of electric three-wheelers and the B2B space where it is currently thriving?
Yes, I think swapping is applicable for all areas. Generally, they work better when there's higher duty cycle, right? At Sun Mobility, we looked at two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and small four-wheelers that go up to 2 tons, right? Which can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 batteries. So it's fairly modular. And the other area, and that's 75% of vehicles in India. The second area is trucks and buses, which is 5% of the vehicles in India, but 50% of the energy we use as a country. And there we have a robotic solution that goes from 3 tons to 55 tons. So I think these are the two segments today that are probably going to be the highest space. And I think two and three wheelers, there's been more maturity. I think in the next 5 years, trucks and buses are going to be the next part of it. And to give a perspective, 2 years ago, trucks in China were around 2% on swappable electric trucks. They've now crossed 60% of all electric trucks in China are swappable. When subsidies went away, it was very difficult to meet the economics. So now an electric truck is the same price as a diesel truck, and the cost per kilometer on swapping is 20% less. And of course, you don't have the infrastructure issues, range anxiety, and the refueling times. So clearly for a country like India, these are the areas where we need to focus on. From an OEM perspective, first of all, there's no silver bullet, right? It's always that there will be fixed charging and fixed batteries, there will be removable batteries, and there'll be swappable batteries.
Right.
It's going to be available for consumers to choose based on their area. But if you see what happened in the US and a lot of countries, infrastructure becomes a huge issue. So in India too, when you cross 20% of demand, of penetration, you're going to see the next big issue with infrastructure. It's not, if you go to Bombay, people will not have a place to charge their two-wheeler, right? Or their three-wheeler. So what do you do in a place like this? You want the infrastructure to be as easy as this. So you can't just say that it's okay in the first early adoption level, but once you scale up, it's going to be very critical, right? And you always start from areas that are high utilization. Once your infrastructure is in Delhi, there's a station every 2 kilometers. Now you can start think of dual use products, people who use it for B2B and B2C, and then slowly move to also B2C. Consumers come and choose. So I think OEMs are recognizing this and they're saying, let's offer the different options to consumers. Early stages, let's control the tech, let's do everything. Now there's understanding that the tech is quite mature and it's about the brand and the business and offering different options to consumers. So I believe there's a shift. We've gotten a lot of, we have over 15 OEMs on our platform today, and in bus and trucks, around 20 of them we're working with them. So I think this is a big shift from 4 or 5 years ago, where it was nascent stages, that we're seeing that. And I do believe that it'll be an important part in India's electrification journey.
I'm glad you brought up consumers because, the best-selling e-scooters in the country, Ola Electric being a prime example, clearly the consumer preference is towards fixed batteries. So Vishal, I'd like to know your thoughts on this matter. Is it possible to include a swappable, model in the portfolio, or the initial investment just doesn't make sense to go in that direction?
So we did announce last month that we will have a swappable battery portfolio vehicle, swappable battery vehicle in our portfolio, right? So, I mean, there are use cases, right? I mean, we started with fixed battery solutions, and that caters to a very specific consumer cohort segment, right? But there are a lot of commercial activities that happen. The charging needs to be done much faster, right? In those cases, right, we see that there is a need for swappable batteries where you can just, sort of charge on the go, right? I mean, just by swapping. And so we have announced, and we will be sort of launching it in April. So we have that as part of our portfolio.
Nitin, I mean, there's clearly the issue that swappable batteries do produce more battery waste, right? Even though they use less lithium. For a recycling firm, is that a win-win, or, in terms of getting material, you are pretty much sorted with, well, we don't have manufacturing waste yet, but, through energy storage solutions, which is primarily where you get your material from. So what is your view on the whole swappable versus fixed battery debate?
So at this point in time, we are fairly invariant to that path, largely because the input stream for recycling today is not really coming from end-of-life EVs or end-of-life swappable batteries, right? It's either coming from production waste or manufacturing waste, which you rightly said is not in India today, but outside India. And it's also coming from black mass all over the world. Now, black mass is part of manufacturing waste, or let's say part of the semi-processed end-of-life battery waste, which is freely importable in the country. And we are able to process that to the best global levels and extract materials out of it. But going forward, Obviously, as swappable batteries, purely from a recycling perspective, are creating more input material for the industry, I'll be all for it.
Parth, I do want to clarify one
Right.
thing, right? So in our case at least, your cycle life is over 3,000 cycles. A swappable vehicle generally has half the size of the battery
Right.
as a fixed battery because you can swap it more times. So you are using actually 1/6 the less amount of kilowatt hours
Mhm.
on life cycle. So actually the total amount of lithium you're using or battery waste is less. The second is the higher performance batteries, because you're multiple different for tier 1 and tier 2 cities. If they reach 80%, you second life them in a tier 2 city for another 3 to 4 years. And then you reflash them and then use them for storage. And then they're easily dismantleable and then going to recycling because you own the battery in the entire life cycle. It's not that each customer owns it. So in reality, A, you would use 6 times less
Right.
battery. 2, you'll probably have a second and third life. And 3, the recycling process will be far better controlled. So the country scales up. These are very important things where actually this is going to it's going to benefit the country as you think of swapping in terms
So
of.
clearly, there's
and-
more synergy between swappable units and
Yeah.
recycling outfits. You'd also mentioned that there's far greater levels of utilization at swapping stations than there are at charging stations. Pulkit, what do you attribute this to? Does it just come down to the logistical nature of the commercial E3-wheeler business? Is it about uneven power supply? What sort of technology is best suited to address all these existing issues that we have?
So for a country like ours, right, the real estate infrastructure itself becomes a constraint. Like Chetan said, once we reach like 20-25% penetration levels, how do you expect parallel parking and charging networks for all the vehicles that would be electric, right? Less than 5% cars in India actually have a dedicated parking space. Imagine millions of vehicles needing a parking and charging space altogether. This is actually where swapping is far more efficient from a per square feet output levels. For example, a 200 square feet shop with a swappable battery systems can serve 200 to 300 vehicles in a day. If you were to imagine two-wheelers and three-wheelers getting parked and charged, it would probably serve 10 to 15, right? So it is far more real estate efficient at a macro level. It is right that today the early adopters for swapping are commercial use cases, but that is because a consumer would first seek where the network is. This is a supply first business, right? If you go out and sell something with a swappable battery today, the first question is, where am I going to swap? So the networks have to come up first, and they would come up on the back of the low hanging demand out there, which is commercial use cases who need to swap more frequently, cannot afford to buy the entire vehicle and reduce their upfront capex by just buying the vehicle minus the battery. All of those factors lead to networks like is coming up in a dense manner. For example, in NCR, we have more than 600 locations where people can go and swap. So now it is dense enough to be able to attract other use cases like a personal user, right? And that is going to be replicated across different cities. That is going to give more confidence to a potential user to be able to buy, let's say, swappable scooters tomorrow that are being launched by various OEMs, and then lead to mass adoption and a faster adoption.
Vishal, how do you sort of, what's your take on this? Because let's flash forward 5 to 10 years from now when market penetration for EVs is considerably higher. How do we sort of accommodate the bulk? You think the technology would have, sort of leapfrogged to a stage where charging times are much shorter? We'll have far bigger, DC charging stations. How do we sort of accommodate the volume of vehicles that will be requiring charge, or do we still depend on domestic charging, which works with e-scooters, but may not, be particularly feasible for e4-wheelers?
As you rightly put, the bulk of charging today happens at home, right? And the best energy distributed system is the energy or the electricity grid, right? So you have it at your place, and it's much easier, right? As sort of the volume grows, and if I just look at it from the cell technology standpoint, there are technologies that we are working on and the global players are working on, which enables fast charging, right? And without degrading the batteries, the battery life. So that is happening. See, India is a large country, right? And all of these solutions out there will coexist, right?
Right.
be it the cell technology or the charging technology, right? And the market will evolve. So as I said, today as we do business, we see a lot of, like when we started, we had only one product portfolio in terms of battery, right, which was a fixed battery. We have come up with a portable battery solution, right, where people can just charge on the go by just swapping. And this is more suited for commercial use case, right, and in the segment that we operate in. But yes, let's say Chetan pointed out the point around, let's say, buses, right? And you see technologies in China where the charging happens very differently for these that you see in India today. Be it in terms of the cell technology that they use, or the charging infrastructure that they use to sort of swap the batteries right on the go for the buses as well. So all of these technologies, right, be it on the cell side or on the charging side, will coexist and will keep evolving. So yeah.
I want to now come to the issue of, sort of upskilling the labor force. But before I do that, in terms of standardization between swappable units and fixed batteries, what should be the imperative for the government? What level of standardization should be introduced?
I think the focus today is number safety, right?
Right.
The safety should be same for fixed and swappable, which they are. The certification process is the same. But you got to realize that you're in a tier 2 city, you're in a tier 1 city, you have scooters that have 1.5 kilowatt powertrains, and you have 8 kilowatt powertrains. There's not going to be a magical thing that fits everyone.
Right.
So at the early stages, have an open mind around the battery sizes and the performance requirements and everything, and let those coexist and let innovation flourish.
Right.
And over time, as industry matures, like anywhere else, standards would come in. So I think the early days is just focus on getting the right safety and the solutions around there, and let market dynamics take it on. And over time, I think it'll settle down in the next 4 to 5 years in a few standards like it has in any other place.
Right. Nitin, what sort of upskilling is required in the, battery recycling space? Particularly, are you working with universities, on what ground level, how are things?
So see, Parth, from a battery recycling perspective, a lot of the processes are automated in nature. We are working a lot with various IITs on incorporating, let's say, robotics in the demanufacturing process, making sure we incorporate AI in the demanufacturing process, make it more and more automated as we go along. But from a pure skilling perspective, the amount of workforce directly involved or required for, let's say, a scaled up recycling industry, that will probably be running into tens of thousands, right, in India, if you really want to get to that level. And there is definitely a skilling need that needs to be done, right? So that's a gap that needs to be addressed today.
Right. I'm afraid we have to wrap up, but my final question is to Vishal, because clearly the most crucial aspect of upskilling falls to, battery cell manufacturing, which will sort of drive innovation. Given the amount of, new battery chemistries you have to experiment with, how does Ola Electric go about, hiring talent, and what does it do to upskill the labor force?
So, so first of all, like India is a global exporter of talent, right?
Yes.
So when we started our cell journey, we got a lot of Indians who were working in the cell industry in China, in Japan, in the US, right? Back, right? So, so that talent pool is out there, right? I mean, that's day zero. But if you really look at it, like, and when we started to build the talent in India, we have a battery innovation center. We have about 500 researchers, right? And when we started to build the talent, we sort of broke the problem statement into smaller sort of units, right? And what we realized is that the talent exists in India. So let's say from a like a pure R&D standpoint, you need a lot of chemists, right? We have that in India, right? They don't operate in the battery field per se, right? But that talent exists in India, in let's say the pharma industry or some other industry. Then you need the mechanical guys here. You have enough of them, plenty of them in the, let's say, the automotive industry, right? So these, so battery, especially the cell, especially, right, it's a convergence of multiple different streams, right? And people exist in all of these streams, not working on batteries, but on some other problem statements, which is very similar to, let's say, batteries. On the manufacturing side as well, I mean, that's again a similar situation and a story. Let's say the electrode manufacturing, where you lot of mix and make the electrodes before, like sort of coating it. It's a similar kind of talent that you have, let's say, in the paint industry, right? The coating process, it's a similar talent that you have in, let's say, the paper industry or the plastics industry. The assembly part, the exact same you have, let's say, in the electronics industry or the bottling industry, right? So there are these talent areas that exist in the market, right? Obviously, they're not like battery ready, but the basic skill set is out there, right? And then, so that's like the talent that exists in the market. So that's one way that we approach. And the second was, just get the bright youngsters who are passing out from college, right? India produces one of the finest engineers, and we obviously give them the opportunity. India lacked that, right? The opportunity didn't exist in the battery field. We give them the opportunity, and we see that they are at par or better than what the global talent that at least I have seen, right? So that's our approach. So I don't think talent in cell is a challenge in India, given that we have like billion people.
So a very optimistic note to sort of conclude this discussion on. Of course, it's a very vast subject. We could talk about it infinitely. But thank you so much, Chetan, Pulkit, Vishal, and Nitin, for coming to the Network 18 Green Bharat Summit. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our panel truly deserves a round of applause. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Parth, for that very riveting conversation. But we have many more facets to cover, ladies and gentlemen. As we said, this is a very fascinating world of electric vehicles, and it's only evolving with each passing day. Ladies and gentlemen, we now want to shift our focus to try and explore the role of technology in powering the future of EV mobility. So, from AI-driven fleet management systems to advancing in charging infrastructure, technology today, ladies and gentlemen, is really at the core of this revolution. So, without any further ado, let me also take this opportunity in welcoming our moderator for this session. Could I request Chandra to join us on stage, Deputy Executive Editor, moneycontrol.com, because she's the one who's going to be steering this conversation. With a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our lovely panel as well. Amitabh Saran, founder and CEO, Alti Green Propulsion Labs, Deepak Jain, Chairman, Lumax Industry, Arun Vinaya, co-founder and CEO at Exponent Energy, and H.A. Dinagar, Head of Vehicle Engineering at OLA Electric, completing this lovely, lovely panel for us. Let's have a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome this stellar panel. Handing it over to Chandra to take the conversation forward.
And thank you for that, Ridhima. A huge round of applause for our speakers. Many from Bangalore this Delhi morning here just for this event. So thank you very much for making that trip. And the first three sessions really set the tone for the summit today. We had a very fiery Amitabh Kant in the morning. Then we had key executives from automakers such as Kia, MG Motors, and so on. And the previous session, of course, had the stalwarts from the battery ecosystem unpacking what it takes. And right now, we are going to dissect the tech that goes into EVs, what kind of innovations are we seeing today, what can we expect going forward, and how can this really help in scaling up the adoption of green mobility in India? How can it make it more affordable and accessible? So thank you very much for that. Amitabh, let me begin with you. EV tech is such a broad subject, but in terms of the innovations that we're seeing in India, give us a sense of, what you do at Alti Green, what new tech innovations are we seeing in the EV space very quickly before we go to the specifics?
Sure. As an OEM, we started, I think, Alti Green started about 12 years back, and we started focusing on components first. So we realized that the big need for India was to have
The
all
moment you
the,
said components,
yeah,
Lumax seemed very interested.
yeah, we started developing motors, controllers, DC-DC, the display clusters, the telematics stacks, anything that was remotely electric in an EV, we realized was something that we need to build in India for India instead of doing these as imports. So we did that for the first 5-6 years. In 2018, we became an OEM. And, since then, obviously, we became a three-wheeler OEM. Since then, of course, a lot of components being built, battery packs, BMS, all that. I think in terms of technology, what I'm seeing over the last 12 years has been that, earlier there was still a lot of influence from, our neighboring countries. I think more and more I see that reducing.
When
There's
you
a
say
lot
neighboring
of,
countries, you mean China?
I mean, China and other neighboring countries. So the good part is that we're now beginning to realize that these are components that can be created in India. And I think a lot of that is already beginning to happen. Some has already happened in different verticals. So not just in three-wheelers, but two-wheelers, four-wheelers, all that, in trucks and buses. That is a good move. I think where I'm missing is still the focus on software.
Right.
I think software for EVs, people are still not realizing when they talk about components that software is going to be one of the primary components in an EV. And I don't think there's enough being done on the automobile software side.
Why do you think that is?
I think, okay, apart from the software startups, I think most of them are incumbents. Software is not something that comes naturally. So it is considered to be something that's on the side, and it does take a lot of time and effort in
And
building
also a
a team.
mindset shift.
Absolutely. So from top to bottom, everyone needs to realize this, and then you need to be able to create a team that doesn't feel alienated from the core business. Okay, this is a core business of automobiles, and by the way, I am a small, 20, 30, 50, 70% team doing automobile software. So I think that integration, that working closely, I think that is something that we will all have to realize in the EV ecosystem. Software is going to play a very, very major role.
Right. Deepak, you represent an auto component powerhouse. So, give us some perspective on what role does hardware innovation play in supporting EV tech and being an auto component supplier. Do you see EV OEMs creating or fostering auto supply chains?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on the panel. I think the way I'm dressed and through the whole peers from Bangalore, I'm probably the odd one out, and also from the component industry. So let me give
there
you,
are two others wearing blazers. So, yeah.
and the tie I meant. Well, let me give you a little bit perspective on the whole EV tech and the component industry. I think from a component point of view, it's a massive opportunity, what we're seeing. And EV has been actually a transition, which is a global transition. It's going to come in India. I think in India, we have to be very clear that which sectors of mobility we can probably transition faster on EV and probably build scale domestically and challenge then the global value chain. From a component point of view, let's say from Lumax, we have been pretty much a powertrain agnostic company, because for us, irrespective of you make EV, you make ICE, you make a gas-based kind of powertrain, our components can fit into it. But from a tech point of view, and I kind of tend to agree with Amitabh, I think it's really fast-tracked the whole component play, the whole technology play. Example, now you have seen few launches in the pass car segment, two-wheeler segment. We never talked about a human-machine interface. We never talked about connected. We never talked about lightweighting. We never talked about even the whole aspect of comfort with mood coming in. So it's become an extension of an individual, of an emotion when you're actually getting into the EV. What it does to the component, guys, there are two challenges. One is that right now the scale is not there to just start putting investments as in to just see. So there's always that chicken and egg kind of dilemma. However, what's happening is that so much of tech you're putting in, you're going to expose the end user, the customer, to this tech. So my personal belief is, irrespective of whatever powertrain is going forward, you will actually have to give this tech to basically the consumers for any vehicle platform, irrespective of the powertrain. This will give economies of scale. This will ensure that products, and I'm not talking about critical EV basically products only. I'm not talking about only batteries or battery management systems. I'm talking about as a vehicle overall. Also in software, I think with this whole development, and just to again give what Amitabh said, I do firmly believe that component guys had been a hardware culture.
Yeah.
Now, even we attempted to get a few software engineers into the company. We probably failed around it, but we learned very quickly that we need to probably set up something in Bangalore or the tech centers around it. Make sure we give them autonomy, independence, and become that as a service or software as a service to not just the customers, but also internally. I think that's where the challenge is, because if I ask a software company, hey, can you sell components, embedded software to the customers? They won't be able to do it. If I say to a component guy, can you build software tech and do it? So you have to have that kind of synergy, but a collaboration, but an inclusive environment to ensure that both competencies are met. However, you are able to give a final solution to the customer.
How tough is it for you, Deepak? Because you have the legacy problem to solve, which a lot of new age companies don't have.
So I think we have to collaborate. I think, 30 years before, when the OEMs were doing collaboration, there was very simple collaboration. Get a component guy globally, get basically the technology from him. So we're very good at collaborating. What we are now doing is a new age collaboration, startups, softwares, electronic players. Basically, everyone, you need to create an inclusive environment. And if you're able to foster a culture of innovation and inclusivity in your organization, I think that would be the key for further collaborations, and including global collaborations per se. Now, from a software and an electronics point of view, what we are trying is we're trying to build an innovation center, which will incubate these. And also we look at relationships by giving and putting in investments in some areas which we did. We recently did something for alternate gas-based. We got a majority stake in this. The culture is different. We just need to then integrate and kind of expose us to the end customer. Eventually, it's the end customer for us, the OEMs, which will decide if we are able to value create through these things.
Right. Arun, give us your own perspective from the exponent energy vantage, right? In terms of solving the charging infrastructure bottleneck for EVs, can fast charging bring down the cost of ownership? What role can tech play there? Give us your perspective.
I think at Exponent, we're an energy company. We don't see ourselves as a charging company. And energy is now a two-sided problem. There's battery on one end, and there's charger on the other. And we think rapid charging sort of, and if you really think about it, if you take the battery out of the equation, the EV is already perfect in some sense. Right? It's faster, it's sexier, it looks better, it's no vibrations, no maintenance. I love that EV. Why am I not buying an EV? Hey, it takes too long to charge. I'm not sure of my battery life. And also, where do I charge? Right? So it's really all about battery tech, battery life, battery charge time, the charging network. So you really need to create the right energy ecosystem that allows people to trust EVs and buy EVs. And at the end of the day, mobility is about freedom. People want to buy a vehicle because they want to do whatever they want, whenever they want. If they had to schedule stuff, they would take a bus, right? So I think that's the freedom and flexibility that still, I think, remains to be unlocked in the EV space. That's our core vision, to make energy simple, make energy accessible. And rapid charging definitely helps. Obviously, energy now is a tech problem. That's why startups like us think we have a right to win. It's not a commodity business. There's energy in the wall. We all have access to it. Question is, how are you going to take energy from the wall and put it into the vehicle? And that's a fundamentally tech problem. And money helps, but money doesn't solve the problem, right? So that's why we think the future of energy, what you see today as commodity businesses as energy, will actually be tech businesses in the future. And I think the company that builds the best energy experience will sort of have a big take on this. Of course, there's swap, there's slow charging, there's rapid charging, there are multiple solutions, and I think there's going to be category-specific energy solutions, right? Right. Rapid charging helps reduce the cost. If I have rapid charging, from our point of view, we're able to reduce battery size, fundamentally reduce the number of cells that you need to put into the vehicle. We're able to optimize battery cost. On the other end, charging is actually a real estate business. So today, I set up a charging station. I charge 2 vehicles a day. It's a terrible business. But on the same piece of land, we're now charging 25 to 30 vehicles. Like fast food is cheaper food. Fast charging is it's actually cheaper charging, right? And so that's how we look at simplifying both sides of the energy business.
Right. And you also set up a new facility recently in Bangalore. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah, so we have something called the E-Park, which is the energy park that we're sort of setting up. It's probably the first time, I'm not sure if it's the first time in India, where we're sort of bringing together R&D, testing, and manufacturing for, well, I think battery technology and energy technology under one roof. Historically, it's always been hard because the designers want to sit in the city and the manufacturing guys are sitting outside the city, and you're always struggling to find personnel. And a lot of battery technology, a lot of R&D in battery manufacturing is not in just design, it's also in process. Like, how do you automate battery manufacturing, right? So it's not just design something and ship it to the factory and sort of a commodity business. So I think now we need R&D in manufacturing more than ever. And this is new to India, because India's actually not great at high-tech manufacturing, right? It's still something that we're sort of figuring out. We've always imported this. We've never done high-volume high-tech, right? So this is the first time. We've done soaps or satellites. So we're now sort of, for the first time in the last 10 years, getting into high-tech, high-volume.
Right. Dinkar, we recently had the opportunity to visit the Giga factory, and it's a very ambitious project. So, in terms of high-tech manufacturing, in terms of, bringing the software element that Amitabh was alluding to, how are you doing it?
Yeah, so I think OLA as a company is very unique. Where it started as a company to code, right? Bhavesh is a coder himself. I heard him say that he wrote the first GPS code for this Ola cabs, which is to be shortest, because the current systems in GPS has a distance accuracy of certain meters. He wanted to have it 1/10 of it. So the company is born out of software. So this is a company which has more software engineers than mechanical engineers, and more electronic engineers than mechanical engineers. Very uniquely placed in the thing. So the entire EV runs with the software as the core of its, or a hub of the wheel, right? Everything gets connected through software, and everything which has mass and volume has costs. Deepak is there to talk about it, because any part you add in the vehicle costs money. The earlier sessions, Amitabh Kant, everybody talked about the price parity of these vehicles. The way to make EVs work is the price parity. So move everything out of this parts which are visible into software code, runs in few bytes and kilobytes inside a chip, makes things possible. So this is the huge thing. And now we are adding an AI layer on top of that to do write codes, verify codes, automate things, learn things, do things with less mistake. So this overall software capability and the tech capability on AI is where the company can do different things. Scale up platforms, create solutions, and have less components. Get the best out of components. Vishal talked about the energy density of our battery pack, one of the best, 4680 form factor. To get the best, anything which is mechanical, get more out of it. Less material to motor, kilowatt per kg of a motor. We are one of the best in the country on a small size platform. We are moving it double. So everywhere when you see material, make it sweat, double the capability, either a cell or at the motor or the electronic, power electronics capability in a size versus power. And everything else moves into software stack, and later on it will slowly move into AI stack. AI in the cloud, which runs to the data coming out of the vehicles, tethered by the 4G today, tomorrow 5G. On an instantaneous basis, half the decisions can shift to cloud, half of them can happen in the vehicle. And the edge-based AIs on the vehicle, thinking along with the user, helping him to drive better, get a range better, get the life of the cells better. So this is what we do in both cell and vehicles.
Right. Question for you, Amitabh and Deepak. Do you see autonomous vehicles take off in India? At least in Silicon Valley, people are now used to, taking a Waymo and riding without a driver. I mean, at least to look at it, it still takes some adjustment. But considering India's infrastructure and roads and everything, do you see this as the next big frontier, and will it really take off?
From my perspective, I think it will take off in limited areas.
Hmm.
So, for example, closed spaces, airports, factories, those kinds of places where I think it's going to be easier and simpler. I think Dinkar mentioned about AI. I see applied AI
Hmm.
playing a big role for us in India to be able to get to a place where ADAS and the recognition of all kinds of oddities on the road can be captured and our software is tested for it. So in India, it's not about a pedestrian, walking on the side of the road. It's you could just walk in. There could be animals. There could be all kinds of things,
Yeah.
potholes. So lots of things, right? So I think applied AI does that for you. It creates millions of use cases according to which you can test your software and be in a position to do it. I think there is still time before autonomous driving, but levels of autonomy, I think you will start seeing ADAS and those kinds of features you will start seeing. In closed spaces, of course, you will start seeing a lot of autonomy happen
Right.
in the country.
Deepak, to some extent, we are seeing this take off in terms of the industrial robotics segment. But in terms of the B2C segment, he said that it will perhaps work in closed spaces, confined spaces. What's your view?
So I think for us, autonomous is an end goal. Safety, passenger safety, pedestrian safety, I think that's all encompassing autonomous. And then different stages of autonomous there is. So for us, I think ADAS gives us a massive opportunity. You're already seeing ADAS on vehicles, different level 1, level 2, level 3. And I think that's where the whole ecosystem, again, from a component point of view, needs to be nurtured. Vision systems, right? We're talking about sensors. We're talking about the whole electronification of a car. And with that, can the component industry challenge a very deep localization? It's not just at a component level. It's actually at the tech level. It's actually talking about design and engineered, because let's understand that until this is localized, you will not get competencies.
Yeah.
And India also has to have unique solutions. India is a very diverse market. So let's not kind of compare it with what US is doing or Silicon Valley is doing or even China is doing. I think India has to find its own solutions at an affordable level. And again, as I mentioned before, we have to prioritize what segments we want to target on mobility. India moves on two-wheelers. We don't move on four-wheelers.
Yeah.
When I talked with my colleagues in the West, we said, hey, we're in the automotive industry. They talk about fast cars. We talk about two-wheelers. So India is a unique market, and the whole autonomous journey will be also very unique and India-centric. I think ADAS, given safety and the ease of driving, will basically be the forefront in this.
Right. Arun, ultimately, can tech actually solve for actual problems that people have, consumers have, when it comes to, adapting to EVs, whether it's battery life, range anxiety, safety concerns? How can tech solve for these real world issues?
Yeah, see, I think with an EV, it's a fundamentally connected platform. It's a digital platform. It's not like software on top, right? It's software actually is a fundamental building block.
It's built into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Two companies with same hardware, but differential software, the team with better software will win, right? And so EVs are now fundamentally changing the rule book of design, manufacturing, selling, service, energy, and financing. Any company that's not tech first will not win the EV game. So if you're thinking, hey, let's be a trader, let's import something and sell it here. And I think the markets have sort of spoken over the last 4 years, right? You have to get your hands dirty. You have to build hardcore tech. And by tech, I'm not just talking software. You got to get deep and dirty into hardware, into manufacturing, along with owning a bunch of software capabilities to really win this. Even financing, right? And we talked about autonomous, right? And in India, for example, more than autonomous, financing is still a large problem. And most people are not able to buy an EV because they don't get finance, because financiers don't understand EV, right? So there's still a large tech problem to be able to solve for battery life, to get financiers to start betting on EV. So I think the problems we choose, I agree with everything everyone said, which the problems we choose and the platforms we build in India will be very unique.
Very different from what the West.
Look very different. Like most people in India don't have charging at home. A large reason why people adopt Exponent is because they just can't charge at home. They don't park at home, right? So it's a very unique problem. So I think every bit of this will look different. Yeah.
Right. Dinkar, I think we have the last 5 minutes, but one point that Mr. Amitabh Kant also made very emphatically is that EV players in India need to do more in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of open sourcing, whatever innovations they are doing on the EV side, on the tech side. What are your own plans with respect to that? Because this is something that Tesla has also adopted.
I'll continue what Arun said, right? The core tech is software, right? For an EV to work, the EV ecosystem to operate, the backend to operate, the manufacturing to operate, and the future designs to evolve. Everything is revolves around software and the way you use either on the design side or on the running of the vehicle and making it run longer or adding features on a regular basis. Everything runs on software. The rest of the things are very open. So theoretically, everybody who buys a vehicle knows what it is. I've never seen a single person saying this is inspiring. Every company looks at every company's design. So it's all coexist together. Every auto company in India knows, every component manufacturer knows every new vehicle's parts. And everybody in the industry knows how every company puts their products together, right? And so there is nothing that to share beyond making a good product and making it run on the road, people looking at it, and you will see them moving. So Ola has done in many places. We have moved away from wires to bus bars. We have moved away from distributed electronics to centrally located electronics. We have moved away from the way the sensors are done. We have moved away from the way the motors are connected. A lot of things are very uniquely done, and they're all out in open. And whether it is openly shared, all our IPs are to be shared. Yes, it's a call to be taken by the company, but the strong belief is that they are no longer secrets. Every engineer knows when he sees an inspiring design, how to do that in a different way. So IP really is not a barrier for a good engineering, but they are all there to share. And if specifically a particular technology of Ola is interesting to someone, yes, there will be a discussion.
Right. On that note, we're out of time, but thank you very much, four of you, for your perspective. And, I think we will be breaking for lunch, but please come back because at 1 p.m. we will have the Union Minister, Nitin Gadkari, here at the venue. Thank you, Ridhima. Thank you very much for that amazing session.
Thank you, Chandra. Thank you to our lovely panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, we will be now breaking for lunch. We will take a short break, but do take this opportunity to network, also to explore Ola electric scooters and bikes. I would also like to remind you that your photos are just a scan away. So you need to look out for the QR codes at the registration and lunch area so that you ensure that your event pictures are with you. But ladies and gentlemen, I'll repeat this again. We'll humbly request you to join us back by 1 p.m. because as Chandra said, we will have the Honorable Road and Transport Minister joining us for the post-lunch session. And when we come back, I'll request everyone to humbly keep their mobile phones on silent so that we can have seamless proceedings of this session. We'll see you all after the short break.